Lena was only 17 when her life changed in a way she never imagined. She lived in a small village where everyone knew each other's names and secrets. Her father worked as a farmer, but the crops had been bad for 2 years. Her mother spent her days worrying about how they would pay the debts. When a tall man with a quiet voice came to their house one evening, Lena didn't know he was bringing a decision that would shape her entire life. The man's name was Thomas. He was a widowed rancher who lived far away from the village. People said he was a good worker, but not an easy man to be around. His wife had passed away 3 years ago, leaving him with 3 children. Since then, he rarely came to the village, and when he did, he only spoke about work. That evening, he spoke with Lena's father in low voices. Lena's mother kept her in the kitchen, but she could still hear bits of their conversation. Words like help, responsibility, and marriage. Her heart began to race even though she didn't yet understand everything. Later that night, her father called her into the small living room. The air was heavy. Her father's eyes looked tired and her mother's hands trembled as she held her shawl. He said Thomas needed a woman to help care for his children and his ranch. He said Thomas was a good man who could provide food, safety, and shelter. Then his voice broke when he said, "It's the only way we can survive, Lena." She froze, unable to breathe. The wall seemed to close in around her. She wanted to say no, to cry, to beg for time, but she saw the fear in her parents' eyes. They weren't being cruel. They were desperate. The wedding was quiet and quick. Only a few neighbors attended. Lena stood beside Thomas, her hands shaking. He didn't smile or look at her much. After the short ceremony, they left the village in his wagon. Lena turned around to see her parents standing by the old house, waving with tears in their eyes. She felt as if she was leaving her childhood behind forever. The journey to the ranch was long and silent. The road was rough, surrounded by dry fields and scattered trees. The wind carried dust and the sky looked endless. Thomas sat beside her, holding the reins tightly. He wasn't cruel, but there was a wall between them, an invisible distance that made her feel like she was sitting next to a stranger. When they finally reached the ranch, Lena saw a wide stretch of land with horses, fences, and a large wooden house. It was quiet, too quiet. No laughter, no voices, only the sound of the wind and the distant cry of a bird. When she entered the house, 3 children stood by the doorway. The eldest, a boy of about 10, stared at her with sharp, questioning eyes. The middle child, a girl around 8, clung to his arm. The youngest, a little boy, hid behind them. Lena smiled nervously and said hello, but none of them answered. Thomas simply told them, "This is Lena, she'll be staying with us now." Then he went outside to take care of the horses, leaving her alone in a room full of silence. That first night, Lena cried quietly under her blanket. She missed her mother's voice, her father's stories by the fire, the sound of the village at night. Everything around her felt cold and strange. The bed was big, but she felt smaller than ever. The next morning, she woke up before sunrise and began her chores. She swept the floors, washed the dishes, and tried to cook breakfast. The children ate in silence, avoiding her eyes. Thomas ate quickly and left for the barn without a word. She felt invisible, like a shadow moving through the house. Days turned into weeks. Lena learned the rhythm of ranch life. The sound of the rooster before dawn, the smell of hay, the heavy buckets of water, and the endless work that filled each day. Sometimes she would pause to watch the sky change colors in the evening, painting gold and red across the land. Those small moments gave her peace. The children still kept their distance, but she noticed small changes. The youngest boy began leaving his toys near her chair. The little girl started asking quietly for help with her hair. Even the eldest, Eli, though still cold, no longer looked at her with anger, only confusion. Thomas remained distant. He spoke to her about work, about feeding the animals, about fixing the fence. Never about feelings or family. Lena often wondered what he was thinking. Sometimes she caught him watching the children play, his face soft for just a second before he turned away. Other times she saw him sitting by the window at night staring at nothing, lost in memories she couldn't reach. She wanted to ask about his wife, but feared that question would break something fragile between them. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, Lena found an old wooden box filled with letters and photographs. The pictures showed Thomas's wife smiling with the children when they were younger. There was warmth in those photos that she didn't see in the house anymore. She put the box back carefully, her heart aching. She realized then that she wasn't just living in another woman's home. She was living in her memory. The shadow of that memory hung over every corner of the ranch. Still, Lena didn't give up. She began planting flowers near the porch, hoping to bring a little color to the dull surroundings. The children started helping her, curious about the bright petals and soft soil. Slowly, laughter began to return to the ranch like sunlight after a long winter. Thomas noticed, though he said little. He would sometimes watch from a distance as Lena worked with the children, something shifting quietly in his expression. But behind her smile, Lena carried heavy thoughts. She wondered if her parents were all right, if they missed her, if they regretted sending her away. She thought about the life she could have had, school, friends, dreams, but those thoughts hurt too much, so she kept them buried. She began writing in a small notebook she had brought from home, filling its pages with her feelings and hopes. It became her secret companion, the only place she could speak freely. One evening, a neighbor woman visited the ranch and spoke kindly to Lena. "You're a brave girl," she said. "When I first heard you were coming here, I thought you wouldn't last a month. But look at you. You've brought life back to this place." Lena smiled softly, unsure how to respond. She didn't feel brave. She just didn't have another choice. But those words warmed her heart. For the first time, she felt seen. Months passed, and the ranch began to change. The children's laughter filled the house again. The flowers bloomed outside, bright against the dusty land. Thomas started joining them for supper, speaking more than before. He still carried sadness in his eyes, but there was something gentler about him now. Lena didn't know it yet, but her quiet kindness was healing more than just the children. It was healing him too. At night, when the wind blew softly through the windows, Lena would sit by the lamp and write. She wrote about fear and courage, about silence and kindness, about how strange it was to grow up in a world that didn't ask her what she wanted. But she also wrote about the small joys, the sound of the horses, the laughter of the children, and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she was becoming stronger than she ever thought she could be. She was still only 17. But she had already learned what many never do. Sometimes life doesn't give you choices, but it gives you chances. And what you do with those chances can change everything. As she blew out the lamp one night and lay down in bed, the sound of gentle rain fell outside. She smiled faintly in the dark, not knowing what the future held. But for the first time since she left her home, she felt a small spark of peace inside her heart. Life on the ranch slowly became a rhythm, though Lena often felt like she was walking a tightrope. Every morning the sun rose over the fields, casting long shadows across the land, and Lena was already awake, moving quietly through the rooms, careful not to disturb anyone. She fed the chickens, filled the water troughs for the horses, and swept the wooden floors until they shone. The children watched her from a distance, their eyes cautious, unsure if she was friend or stranger. The eldest, Eli, often sat on the porch, arms crossed, and studied her as though he were trying to solve a difficult puzzle. At first, the children were cold and distant. Eli, in particular, resented her presence. He whispered to his sister about how Lena would never replace their mother, and he often tried to sabotage her attempts to care for them, hiding toys or spilling water. The middle child, Anna, clung to her brother's side, learning quickly how to share his anger, while the youngest, little Sam, looked at Lena with wide, curious eyes but didn't know what to say. Every day felt like a challenge. Lena had to balance kindness with firmness, patience with authority, all while carrying her own fear and sadness in silence. Despite the children's resistance, Lena never gave up. She began learning small things about each of them: the sound of Eli's laugh when he thought no one was listening, Anna's love for drawing flowers, and Sam's fascination with the horses. She began leaving small notes for them, simple messages like, "Good morning," "Don't forget your breakfast," or "I saved some apples for you." Slowly, these gestures softened their hearts. Sam began bringing her small gifts like shiny stones or feathers he found outside, placing them gently on the table where she worked. Anna started drawing pictures and leaving them on the porch steps for Lena to find. Eli was harder. He watched skeptical, but even he began to listen when Lena read stories to them in the evenings. Thomas remained distant, a shadow hovering quietly in the background. He spoke mainly about chores, about the weather, about the work that had to be done. He never asked about Lena, never noticed her small victories with the children, never acknowledged her efforts. Lena sometimes caught him staring out of the window, jaw tight, eyes far away. She wondered what haunted him, what memories he carried that made it so hard for him to trust her. She wanted to reach out, but she feared that touching his grief would only push him further away. One afternoon, Lena decided to clean the old barn. Dust swirled in the sunlight that came through the broken windows, and the smell of hay and straw filled the air. As she worked, she found old toys and clothes that belonged to the children when they were smaller. She cleaned them carefully and arranged them neatly in a corner. When the children saw her effort, Anna gasped and ran over to help, while Sam followed closely behind, eager to lift small objects for her. Eli hung back, watching, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Interest, maybe, or curiosity. That evening, the children played together in the barn, and Lena watched them, a small smile touching her lips. It was the first time in months that the house had felt alive. Evenings were Lena's quiet time. After the chores were done and the children were tucked into bed, she would sit by the fireplace writing in her notebook. She wrote about the day's victories and defeats, about the small moments of joy she found among the work, and about the hope that grew quietly in her chest. Sometimes she wrote about Thomas, about his silent sorrow, about how she wished she could reach him. She didn't yet understand the depth of his pain, but she felt it, like a shadow that followed him around the house. One evening, a knock came at the door. It was Mrs. Harper, a neighbor who had always been kind to the family. She carried a basket of bread and a warm smile. "How are you holding up, Lena?" she asked gently. Lena hesitated, unsure what to say. "It's different," she finally said. "Sometimes hard, sometimes good." Mrs. Harper nodded knowingly. "You're a brave girl," she said. "It's not easy to step into a house full of sorrow and pain. But you've brought a light here. The children, they feel it. Thomas feels it even if he doesn't say it." Lena felt a warmth spread in her chest. Brave? She didn't feel brave, not really. She just kept going, one day at a time. But somehow hearing it out loud made her believe it a little more. As weeks turned into months, Lena began to notice changes. The children laughed more often, even Eli. He would sometimes sit beside her in the kitchen, helping her knead bread or prepare dinner. Anna began telling her about her drawings, showing Lena the little stories she created. Sam followed her everywhere, asking questions about everything, from the horses to the stars. Thomas started to speak in small ways, offering advice about caring for the animals, asking about the children's meals, and even noticing the flowers Lena had planted outside the porch. It wasn't much, but it was enough to feel hope. One afternoon, while tidying the attic, Lena found a wooden box tucked behind old furniture. Curious, she opened it carefully. Inside were photographs of Thomas with his late wife, smiling and happy, and letters written in her delicate handwriting. The letters spoke of love, laughter, and family dreams. Lena held a photograph of the children when they were younger, their faces innocent and bright. She felt a pang of sadness for the life that had been, for the mother who was gone, and for the man who carried the weight of that loss. She put the box back gently, careful not to disturb it. It was a reminder that she was walking into someone else's memory, someone else's pain, and yet she also understood that she could help heal it. Days passed, and Lena began creating small routines with the children. They would gather in the mornings to feed the chickens together. In the afternoons, she would read stories aloud, encouraging the children to ask questions and share their thoughts. She taught them small games and helped them with chores in a way that made work fun. Slowly, walls built from grief and fear began to crumble. The house, once filled with silence and tension, now carried the sounds of footsteps, laughter, and whispered secrets. Even Thomas noticed, though he never commented aloud, how the atmosphere had changed. One rainy evening, Lena found herself sitting on the porch with Eli. The boy had been unusually quiet all day, his face pale and serious. "Do you miss her?" Lena asked softly, careful not to push too hard. Eli didn't answer at first, staring at the rain as it slid down the wooden beams. Then finally he nodded. "Every day," he whispered. Lena reached over and put a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's okay," she said. "She loved you very much, and it's okay to miss her. But it's also okay to smile again." Eli's lips twitched, almost a smile. Lena didn't say anything more. She just let him sit beside her, sharing the silence. In that quiet moment, she realized that connection didn't need words. Sometimes it was enough to simply be there. Even as life began to settle into a routine, Lena faced moments of doubt. She wondered if she truly belonged on the ranch, if the children and Thomas would ever see her as more than a stranger, if she would ever feel fully at home. Some nights she would wake up with a lump in her throat, missing the village, her family, and the life she had left behind. But then she would look around at the children sleeping soundly in their beds, at the soft glow of the firelight, and she would remember why she stayed, because even in a life she didn't choose, she could bring light, hope, and love. Thomas began noticing her in ways he hadn't before. He observed how patient she was with the children, how carefully she cared for the animals, and how she seemed to find beauty in small things, even in the hard work of the ranch. He didn't know how to speak about it, so he watched quietly, letting his respect grow in silence. For the first time in years, he began to imagine that perhaps life didn't have to be so lonely, that perhaps someone could fill the spaces left by loss without trying to erase the past. As months turned into a full year, Lena's presence on the ranch was no longer seen as an intrusion. The children looked to her for guidance, comfort, and companionship. The house was alive, full of laughter, stories, and small victories. Thomas, though still quiet, had begun to share moments with her. A simple conversation in the kitchen, a question about the fields, a small acknowledgement of her efforts. And Lena, though she never expected it, began to feel like she had a place, a family, and a purpose. One evening, Lena sat by the window, watching the sun set over the fields. The sky was a canvas of orange and pink, the wind whispering through the trees. She reflected on the past year, the fear, the loneliness, the small moments of joy, the laughter of children, and the slow, quiet changes in Thomas. She realized that even though life had started with pain and uncertainty, it had given her opportunities to grow, to love, and to be strong. She closed her notebook, feeling a small spark of hope in her heart. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew that she had survived, learned, and begun to heal. And in that moment, Lena understood that sometimes the hardest beginnings could lead to the most unexpected and beautiful journeys. Lena had begun to feel settled on the ranch, but life has a way of surprising even those who think they have found balance. One late afternoon, as the golden sun dipped toward the horizon, Lena was cleaning the study when she noticed a small envelope tucked behind Thomas's desk. It was yellowed with age and sealed with a faded red stamp. Curiosity and hesitation battled within her. She had promised herself she would respect the house and the man who had taken her in, but something about the envelope felt important. Gently, she opened it and found a letter addressed to Thomas. The handwriting was elegant and familiar. It belonged to his late wife. As she read, Lena's heart skipped a beat. The letter spoke of love, dreams for the children, and instructions for caring for them in her absence should anything happen. But then she found another note written more recently, hidden beneath the first. This note wasn't from his wife, it was from her father. Her stomach twisted as she read the words. Thomas had agreed to marry Lena not out of affection, but because her father had asked him to settle a debt. The letter explained that Thomas would be given financial support in exchange for taking Lena as his wife. Shock froze her in place. Her chest felt tight, and the walls seemed to close in around her. She had imagined Thomas had chosen her for some reason beyond duty, maybe even kindness. Now she realized that the truth was far more complicated. She was not a bride by love. She was a solution to a problem, a payment for a debt. Her hands shook as she closed the envelope and put it back carefully, trying to steady herself. That night, Lena lay awake, unable to stop the thoughts swirling in her mind. She felt anger toward her father for sending her away, confusion about Thomas and his feelings, and sorrow for herself. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, she considered leaving. She could return to her village, to her parents, to the life she had lost. Yet she also knew the children would be left without someone who cared for them. She thought of the small moments, the laughter she had coaxed out of Eli, the shy smiles from Anna, Sam's curious eyes following her everywhere, and something held her back. Despite everything, she had grown attached. The next day, a storm began to gather. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, and the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Lena had been planning to visit the fields and check on the animals, but the storm made it impossible. She hurried inside, securing the doors and windows, and called the children to stay close. Thomas was out in the barn, finishing chores before the weather trapped him. The first drops of rain began to fall, heavy and cold, and the sound of thunder echoed across the open land. Suddenly, little Sam began coughing violently. Lena rushed to his side, lifting him into her arms. His small body shook and Lena's heart pounded. "It's okay, Sam, I'm here," she whispered, rocking him gently. Anna watched in fear, her eyes wide with worry, while Eli stood frozen, unsure what to do. Lena called out for Thomas, but the barn door had already slammed shut, and he was nowhere to be seen. She wrapped a blanket around Sam, checking his temperature, giving him water and holding him close. She refused to let panic take over, even though inside she was terrified. Hours passed. The storm grew stronger, the rain pouring down in sheets, wind howling like a wild animal. Lena stayed by Sam's side, comforting him, singing softly to calm his frightened heart. Anna helped by bringing towels and blankets, and even Eli finally stepped forward, holding the little one's hand as Lena cared for him. It was a long, exhausting night. The storm raged outside, but inside the house something remarkable happened. The children leaned on Lena, trusting her completely. For the first time, they saw her not as a stranger or a solution, but as someone who loved them deeply. By morning, the storm had passed. The sun rose slowly, casting pale light over the wet fields. Thomas finally returned from the barn, soaked and tired. He found Lena sitting on the floor, Sam in her lap, Anna beside her, and Eli standing silently nearby. For a moment he said nothing, simply taking in the scene. Then he knelt down, his expression softened, and said, "You saved him." His voice was low, but there was admiration in it. Lena looked up, weary but relieved, and nodded. "He's strong," she said softly, "but he needed help." That morning, as the children began to play again and the sun dried the wet earth, Thomas pulled Lena aside. "I didn't realize," he started, struggling with words. "I didn't see how much you've done, how much you care." Lena felt a flicker of hope, but she remembered the letter she had found. Should she tell him what she knew about the debt? She hesitated, then decided not yet. For now, she would let this moment of acknowledgement stand. Thomas's first words of praise were a small victory in a long, hard journey. Over the next few days, the ranch began to feel different. Thomas was more present, helping Lena with chores, speaking with the children, even sharing small smiles. He didn't explain his past or confess his loneliness fully, but his actions spoke louder than words. Lena, in turn, continued her careful work, caring for the children, maintaining the house, tending the garden, and looking after the animals. The children, now confident that Lena was here to stay, grew closer to her. Eli sometimes leaned against her as she worked. Anna held her hand while helping feed the chickens, and Sam's laughter rang across the yard like music. But even in these moments of peace, Lena's mind returned to the envelope, to the letter, to the truth she had discovered. She wondered if Thomas would ever see her as more than a duty fulfilled, more than a solution to a problem. She wanted him to know that she had grown, that she had endured hardship and loneliness, and that she had given her heart to his children and to the ranch. Yet fear held her back. She worried that telling him might drive a wedge between them, that the past could undo the fragile bond they were building. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Lena found herself alone on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. She thought about the children sleeping upstairs, the wind rustling the trees, and the quiet strength she had found within herself. She realized that even though life had thrown her into circumstances she hadn't chosen, she had found purpose. She had become a protector, a caregiver, a presence that mattered. And though the storm had terrified her, it had also revealed her own courage, her ability to face fear and keep others safe. The days that followed brought small joys and subtle changes. Thomas began leaving notes for Lena, reminding her of tasks or asking her opinion about the garden. He shared meals with her more often, speaking in a soft voice that carried a hint of warmth. The children laughed together freely, building forts, playing games, and sharing stories. Lena watched them, feeling a mixture of pride and love. She knew the bond she had built was real, that she had earned a place in their hearts, and that her life on the ranch had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. Yet, the letter she had found remained in her thoughts. She knew the truth had a way of revealing itself at the right moment. Perhaps one day she would tell Thomas that she knew the story of the debt, that she understood the circumstances that had brought them together, and perhaps then they could finally be honest with each other, free of secrets and fear. For now she chose patience, observation, and quiet courage. She had learned that some battles are won not with words but with actions, love, and resilience. One night, as Lena tucked the children into bed, Eli whispered something that surprised her. "I like you," he said simply, his eyes serious. Anna and Sam nodded in agreement. Lena's heart swelled with emotion. It wasn't about the debt, the arrangement, or the past anymore. It was about trust, love, and family. In that moment, she realized that she had not only survived the storm outside, but also the storm of doubt and fear inside herself. She had made a home, and she had made herself a part of it. The sun rose the next morning, shining over wet fields glistening like jewels. Lena stepped outside, taking a deep breath of fresh air. She knew challenges were still ahead. There would always be hard days, moments of loneliness, and times when the weight of the past pressed down. But she also knew that she had faced fear, cared for those who depended on her, and gained respect from a man whose life had been full of sorrow. For the first time, she truly understood that life was not only about what happened to you, but also about what you chose to do with it. And in the quiet calm after the storm, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The months after the storm brought a quiet change to the ranch. The house was no longer just walls and furniture. It had become a home filled with laughter, small routines, and moments of warmth. Lena had grown stronger and more confident, and even Thomas seemed to soften in ways that surprised him. He still carried the weight of the past, the memories of his late wife, and the heavy responsibility of raising 3 children alone. But now there was a spark, a sense of life returning that he hadn't felt in years. Lena noticed small things first. The children laughed more freely, chasing each other through the yard, their voices carrying across the fields. Thomas began lingering at the table after meals, asking questions about their day or commenting on the garden. He even joined Lena on walks through the fields, showing her how to identify different herbs and plants. At first, Lena had been cautious, unsure if this was genuine or temporary, but over time, she realized that Thomas was slowly letting her into his world. One afternoon, Lena was helping Anna with a drawing when Thomas came into the room, his face calm but serious. "Anna," he said, "would you like to help me check the barn?" Anna's eyes lit up with excitement and she nodded eagerly. Lena smiled, happy to see the children involved in the ranch work. As they left, Thomas lingered at the door. "Lena," he said softly, "thank you for everything you've done for them. And for me." Lena's heart skipped a beat. She had never expected gratitude, let alone acknowledgement, from Thomas. She simply nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Despite these changes, life was not without its challenges. One morning, as Lena was feeding the chickens, she saw a figure approaching from the dusty road. It was her father. Her stomach tightened. He had come unexpectedly, and the sight of him brought a flood of emotions: fear, anger, sadness, and uncertainty. He carried himself with the same old authority she had known, but now Lena felt different. She was no longer the frightened girl he could command with a word. She had grown, learned, and found her own strength. Her father entered the house without waiting for an invitation, and Lena met him in the kitchen. "Thomas," he said, his voice sharp, "we need to talk." Thomas looked at Lena briefly, then at her father, his expression calm but guarded. Lena's father explained that he had come to collect money from Thomas, insisting that the arrangement that had brought Lena to the ranch be honored. Lena's heart pounded. She had feared this confrontation, worried about what her father might say or do. But as she watched Thomas, she realized something important. He would face this challenge not alone, but with her. "I will not give you money," Thomas said firmly. "Lena is not property. She is part of this family, and this family is not for sale." Lena's father's face reddened with anger. "You think I will let this go? She was given to you. You owe me." Thomas stepped closer, his voice steady. "We are not bound by debts anymore. Lena is here because she belongs here, and she is part of this family. If you cannot respect that, you must leave." Lena watched the exchange, her own emotions swirling. For years she had felt powerless, trapped in a world where decisions about her life were made by others. Now she realized she could speak too. She took a deep breath. "Father," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I am not a thing to be given or sold. I have worked hard, cared for these children, and built a life here. This is my home now, and I choose to stay." Her father froze, staring at her as though seeing her for the first time. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Lena felt a sense of pride and relief wash over her. She had found her voice, and she had used it to claim her own life. Thomas stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Together they faced her father, unafraid and united. Finally he turned and left, muttering under his breath but defeated. Lena felt a weight lift from her chest. The confrontation had tested their bond, but it had also strengthened it. In the days that followed, life on the ranch grew even warmer. Thomas began to speak more openly about his past, sharing memories of his late wife, his regrets, and the guilt that had kept him distant. Lena listened patiently, offering comfort without judgment. She began to understand the depth of his sorrow and realized that his silence had not been coldness, but protection. From himself, from the pain of loss, and from fear of new attachments. In turn, Thomas began to notice Lena not just as a helper, but as a partner in the true sense, a companion who shared the burdens, joys, and responsibilities of life on the ranch. The children thrived in this environment. Eli laughed more freely, sometimes confiding small worries or dreams to Lena. Anna continued to draw and paint, sharing her stories and imagination. Little Sam followed her everywhere, asking endless questions and soaking up her attention. The house, once filled with silence and tension, now resonated with joy, creativity, and warmth. Even the animals seemed happier, responding to the calm energy that Lena brought into every corner of the ranch. One evening, as the family gathered around the fireplace, Thomas looked at Lena with something new in his eyes. Admiration, respect, and a quiet affection that he had never shown before. "You've changed this place," he said softly. "I didn't know it could feel like a home again." "Not after everything." Lena smiled, feeling her heart swell. "It was never just me," she replied. "It's all of us. We've built this together." Thomas nodded, and for a long moment, they simply sat together watching the fire, feeling a sense of peace that had been absent for years. But life had a way of reminding them that the past was never far away. One afternoon, while tending to the garden, Lena discovered that the soil was not as fertile as it should have been. She dug deeper and found remnants of old tools and materials buried beneath the earth. It reminded her of how much work the ranch had required even before she arrived, and how much it had endured over time. She realized that while they had healed many things, some challenges would always remain, yet she also knew that together they could face them. Thomas began involving Lena more in decisions about the ranch. He asked her opinion on planting schedules, repairs, and managing the animals. Lena felt a sense of pride and belonging she had never known. She was no longer just a helper. She was a vital part of the ranch, respected and trusted by the man who had once seemed unreachable. Their partnership grew quietly but steadily, built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and an understanding that life was not about perfection, but about effort, care, and love. One night, Lena found herself sitting by the window, watching the stars emerge in the clear sky. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a frightened 17-year-old forced into marriage to a young woman who had found her voice, her strength, and her place. She realized that the ranch, the children, and Thomas had changed her as much as she had changed them. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to keep moving forward despite it. As she turned back to the children's rooms, she noticed Eli quietly reading a book by lamplight, Anna sketching in her notebook, and Sam sleeping peacefully, a small smile on his face. Thomas sat nearby, polishing tools, but glancing at her occasionally with a soft expression. Lena felt a deep sense of gratitude for the challenges, the hardships, and the unexpected joys. She understood that family was not just blood or arrangement. It was the bond built through care, respect, and love. Weeks passed and the seasons began to change. The ranch bloomed with life, flowers in the garden, green pastures for the horses, and laughter echoing through the house. Lena continued to care for the children, manage the home, and support Thomas, but she also began to think beyond the ranch. She dreamed of helping other girls like herself, who had been forced into situations beyond their control, and of creating a future that offered hope, guidance, and opportunity. One evening, as the family sat together after dinner, Thomas spoke quietly. "You've done more than I could have imagined," he said. "Not just for the ranch, but for the children. For me. I don't know what I would have done without you." Lena felt a warmth rise in her chest. She realized that in the quiet moments of patience, kindness, and courage, she had not only earned their respect, but had also earned their love. And in return, she had found a family, a home, and a life she could be proud of. In the calm that followed, Lena reflected on how far they had all come. The children were happy. Thomas was opening his heart, and the ranch had transformed from a place of grief into a place of life. The confrontation with her father had tested their strength, but it had also shown Lena the power of standing up for herself and those she loved. She understood that challenges would continue, but with courage, honesty, and care, they could face anything together. And in that moment, as the fire crackled and the wind whispered outside, Lena felt a profound sense of belonging, hope, and love. A feeling she had never imagined possible when she first arrived at the ranch all those months ago. Years had passed since Lena first arrived at the ranch as a frightened 17-year-old. The house that had once been silent and cold was now alive with laughter, chatter, and the soft rhythms of a family who had learned to trust each other. The children had grown stronger, more confident and full of life, and Thomas had begun to let his heart heal. Lena had become more than a caregiver. She had become a partner, a confidant, and the soul that held the family together. Yet even as peace settled over their lives, Lena's spirit was restless in a different way. She wanted to do more than just care for this family. She wanted to make a difference beyond the ranch, to create hope for girls who, like her, had faced choices that were never really theirs. One morning, Lena woke early to find Thomas already in the fields, checking the fences. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden glow over the pastures. She paused on the porch, breathing in the crisp air, and watched the children playing near the garden. Eli had grown into a thoughtful, protective young man, still serious at times, but capable of laughter that was free and genuine. Anna skipped through the flowers, her arms full of blossoms she had picked, and Sam chased after a small rabbit that had wandered into the yard. Lena smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment and love she had never known before. As she moved through the morning chores, Lena noticed Thomas approaching with a gentle smile. "You've done so much here," he said quietly. "Not just for me and the children, but for the ranch itself. You've made it a home again." Lena felt warmth spread in her chest. For the first time, she realized that Thomas no longer saw her as an outsider or a solution to a problem. He saw her as someone who had brought life, love, and hope to all of them. That afternoon, Lena made a decision. She wanted to give back to other girls like her, those who had been forced into situations without choice or opportunity. She had saved small amounts of money over the years, planning quietly and carefully. Now she decided it was time to act. She began converting a small barn into a classroom, cleaning it thoroughly and bringing in old books, chairs, and desks. The children helped her, eager to be a part of her new project. Thomas watched, intrigued, but supportive, and never once doubted that Lena could succeed. Word spread quickly through the nearby villages. Girls who had never had a chance to attend school arrived at the ranch, shy and hesitant at first. Lena welcomed them with kindness, teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, and, most importantly, courage and self-respect. She shared her own story gently, showing them that hardship could be transformed into strength. The children from the ranch often helped with the lessons, reading aloud, guiding younger girls, and learning alongside them. The barn became a place of light, laughter, and learning, and Lena felt a deep sense of pride. Thomas's respect and admiration for Lena grew even deeper as he watched her teach. He noticed the way she inspired others, how her calm strength encouraged confidence, and how her presence brought hope to lives that had often been filled with hardship. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, he approached her while she was cleaning the classroom. "You've changed so many lives," he said softly. "Not just mine, not just the children's, but theirs too. You've made this place more than I ever imagined." Lena looked up at him, her heart swelling. "We've all grown together," she replied. "This isn't just my dream. It's all of ours." The children continued to flourish. Eli, now more confident, helped organize small activities for the girls. Anna guided them through art and storytelling, encouraging creativity. Sam, with his endless curiosity, became a helper in the garden, teaching the girls about plants and animals. The house, once a place of grief and uncertainty, was now a center of learning, laughter, and hope. Even the neighbors began to notice the transformation. They admired Lena's dedication and strength, and many began supporting her project with small donations, supplies, or volunteering time. One day, Lena received a letter from her father. He had heard about the school and wanted to visit, perhaps out of curiosity or perhaps to see what she had accomplished. Lena felt a mix of emotions, fear, anger, but also a calm sense of readiness. When he arrived, she welcomed him politely, showing him the classroom, the children, and the garden. He looked around in awe, speechless for a long time. I didn't know, he finally said, his voice low. Lena smiled gently. It's never too late to see what can be done with care and effort, she said. He nodded, a faint sense of pride in his expression, and left quietly, leaving Lena with a feeling of closure and strength. Life on the ranch continued, marked by seasons and growth. The school became well known in the surrounding villages, and Lena's reputation as a caring, strong, and wise woman spread. She taught the girls not just academics, but the values of resilience, courage, and kindness. She shared stories of her own journey, showing them that even when life seemed unfair, choices could be made, strength could be found, and a new path could be created. The girls looked up to her as a mentor, a guide, and, for many, a symbol of hope. Thomas and Lena's relationship also grew in depth and affection. Though they had started as strangers bound by circumstance, they had become partners in every sense. Thomas supported her school, shared responsibilities at the ranch, and spent more time with the children, showing patience and love. Together they faced challenges, celebrated successes, and learned to communicate openly. Thomas admired Lena not just for her courage, but for her ability to inspire others, for her wisdom, and for the way she nurtured life wherever she went. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Lena and Thomas sat together on the porch watching the sun set over the fields. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, the air filled with the soft chirping of birds settling in for the night. I never imagined this, Thomas said quietly. I thought life would always be hard, lonely, and quiet. But you've changed everything. Lena leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his presence. We changed it together, she said softly. All of us. The ranch was thriving. The children were happy and healthy, learning lessons not just from books but from life itself. The girls who came to the school were growing in confidence and knowledge, inspired by Lena's courage and example. And Lena herself had grown into a woman who had faced fear, hardship, and doubt, and transformed it into strength, love, and purpose. She had gone from a girl given away into a woman who gave hope to others. As the years went by, Lena's story spread further. Villagers, travelers, and friends would come to see the ranch, not just for its beauty but for the life it represented. A life of second chances, of resilience, and of love that had been earned through patience and courage. The ranch became a place where people could see the power of kindness, the strength of character, and the impact one person could make when they refused to give up. Lena often reflected on her journey. She remembered the fear she had felt at 17, standing in a house that was not hers, surrounded by children who didn't trust her, and a man she didn't know. She thought of the storms, both literal and emotional, that had tested her courage, and she marveled at how far she had come, from uncertainty and fear to a life full of love, purpose, and family. She realized that the hardships she had endured had shaped her, made her strong, and given her the wisdom to help others. One day, as she walked through the garden with Thomas and the children, Lena paused to look around. The sun shone on the green pastures, the flowers bloomed brilliantly, and the children laughed as they ran together. Thomas squeezed her hand gently. "You've done something remarkable," he said. "You've built more than a home. You've built a life worth living." Lena smiled, her heart full. "It wasn't just me," she said. "It was all of us. And it's only just beginning." Years later, the ranch and school flourished. Girls who had once felt powerless now had education, confidence, and hope. The children grew into capable, kind, and thoughtful young adults, ready to face the world. Thomas and Lena continued their life together, partners in every sense, proud of the family and community they had nurtured. Lena often thought back to the day she had arrived at the ranch, frightened and uncertain, and she realized how truly far she had come. The story of the girl who had been given away at 17 became an inspiration to everyone who knew her. She had taken a life that began with fear and uncertainty and transformed it into one of love, hope, and courage. She had faced hardships, gained trust, and built a family not only of blood but of hearts. And in the end, Lena's legacy was not just the family she had nurtured, but the countless lives she had touched, the hope she had given, and the proof that even the most difficult beginnings could lead to the most beautiful endings. And so, on the ranch where it all began, with the fields stretching wide under the sun, the children playing, and the school full of laughter, Lena stood quietly for a moment, letting the wind brush against her face. She knew that life was still full of challenges, but she also knew that she had the courage, the strength, and the love to face anything. She had been given away, but now she was giving back, a legacy of hope that would last far beyond her own lifetime.